Hey guys, Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale with another top player spotlight. You guys really enjoyed the last one we did with Zed. Today we're going to bring you Bright Light. Now, if you've taken a look at the top leaderboard, anytime in the last 6 months or so, you probably saw Bright Light's name there. He's been #1 in the world multiple times. This is one of the 2 decks we're going to review in today's episode. I had a chance to sit down, have a chat with him. Here's some screenshots. By the way, right now he's 5th in the world, but here's some screenshots of him #1 in the world, just so you have that proof of purchase, so to speak. And what we're going to do is go over these decks. He was kind enough to share a bunch of his replays, and he was also kind enough to share a bunch of his tips for these decks. You guys know I like to ask a lot of the same questions to these top players in the game, and Bright Light was super generous with his time, giving me a very full, in-depth review of these decks, really sharing a bunch of basics and advanced tips for both of the decks we're going to be reviewing today. Some of the things we're going to be discussing are the overall summary of the deck. What is this deck trying to accomplish, both offensively and defensively? We'll talk about the ideal combinations of cards to use in both of those scenarios, and of course we'll talk about the biggest mistakes he sees other people using when using the same deck or a similar deck. So I think that's one of the most valuable things that we'll discuss in today's episode. So before we get into all those advanced strategy tips from Bright Light himself, let's just review the deck and talk about the cards and some possible substitutions before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So one of the first things that caught my eye when I saw that this was his go-to ladder deck is that the deck is so basic that anybody can use it, really for any Arena 6 and beyond. Of course, the Elixir Collector is unlocked Arena 6, and after that, you have all the cards you need to actually run this deck and have success with it. So you only actually have 4 troops in this deck. You have the Hog, the Barbarians, the Archers, and the Knights. The rest are either spells or the Elixir Pump or the Cannon, the 2 spells being Freeze and Poison. So no Zap in this deck, so those of you who are used to running Zap in pretty much all your decks, you do have to adjust a little bit. Of course, you do have Freeze on the other hand here. So your Cannon, obviously, you guys know what a Cannon does. It's your defensive distracting unit. It buys you some time. It distracts tanks. Very important card in the deck. I mean, these are all very basic tips. I won't spend too much time going over them. Obviously, you guys know if you're running an Elixir Pump in your deck, you have to use it. Don't be super aggressive offensively during the wrong times. Make sure you pump up in between these little defensive or offensive spurts. So anyway, going on to the actual tips, because that's what you guys are really here for, let's kind of get right into it here. And let's start with the best offensive combinations in this deck. So what you're trying to do here is combo the Knight and the Hog Rider. Now, if you're a player who usually plays Trifecta or a Hog Cycle deck like myself, that might sound a little bit weird. I mean, the Knight is a slow-moving tank, and a Hog Rider is a fast-moving offensive proxy card. So why do you combo them together in this deck? And it's all basically because of the freeze spell. Bright Light told me that his #1 offensive combination is getting a Knight in the lane, and then getting a Hog behind him, and then what you want to do is wait to see what the opponent counters with, and drop your freeze only in one circumstance. You want to wait for the perfect time. The perfect time is you need to make sure if you use your freeze spell that you're getting a positive elixir trade from that exchange. So in other words, if they're countering your Knight and your Hog with just goblins or just a tower, don't use your freeze spell. If they're countering your Hog and your Knight with the Barbarians that you saw on the map right there in that replay that just ended, then you can use your freeze spell, because what's going to happen is your Knight is going to kill all the troops that were frozen, unless he's already at the tower, in which case that's okay too, because then you'll have a Hog and the Knight on the tower. But what you want to do is always make sure you're getting a good end of the deal in terms of those elixir trades when you're using that freeze spell. So make sure that you're freezing at least 4 troop worth of elixir is another way to put it. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, there is an exception to this rule, and that is if you're at the end of a match, or if it's a really tight match and you just need to get the tower down, it's very low on HP, or you just need to make that really aggressive move to tilt things in your favor, then of course you can, in some circumstances like that, go ahead and use your freeze spell in those circumstances. But more often than not, this deck is all about trying to maintain that positive elixir advantage over your opponent, so that's why you're going to pump as often as possible. You're only going to use freeze when you can get a lot of value out of it, and you're going to make sure you defend properly. So let's talk a little bit about the Barbarians, because the Barbarians can actually be used offensively too. What Bright Light said is, because Poison is so OP in the game right now, and almost everybody plays Poison nowadays, you just go into every match now assuming your opponent has Poison. So what you want to do is assume they have the Poison spell, and don't play your Barbarians offensively unless your opponent has been baited out of their Poison. So as with any deck, whether you're trying to bait out arrows or bait out zap or whatever you're trying to do, consider Poison a baitable spell as well. Make sure you think of it in the same way that you would think of, say, arrows or zap if you're running like a Goblin Barrel Miner deck or something like that. So bait the Poison out and then use the Barbarians offensively if you have to. You can see there, Bright Light definitely not opposed to using the freeze spell defensively too. He has the cannon also shooting into the oncoming troops, doing a really effective job of killing them all while they're frozen. So before we leave the subject of Poison behind, I do want to make another note or two about the spell. So we already said that Bright Light just assumes going into every match that his opponent is playing a Poison card. So that's very important, especially in the beginning of the match, but of course all throughout the match, that you have your placement of your cards correct. It's absolutely imperative that you place your archers and your knight in the proper positions to avoid the Poison spell. So you want to place your archers on the opposite side of the cannon to defend against incoming troops, and you want to make sure that you place your knight, you save your knight, and you don't put your knight on the incoming tanks in the lane. So if there's a giant hypothetically coming at you in the lane, or in this case a bowler, you want to make sure that you place your knight last, right near the bridge onto the range units that are trailing the tank instead of right on the tank. Now that might seem pretty obvious to some of you guys, but you'd be surprised at how many players I see, for whatever reason, placing their tanky unit on the opponent's tanky unit, and that's not what you want to try to do. You want to use your tanky unit, whether it be a Valkyrie in a Trifecta deck or a Knight in a deck like this. You want to make sure you use them near the bridge on the range units. They can take a few hits there, so don't be afraid to use your knight defensively on the bridge, and of course don't be afraid to use your free spell defensively, as you saw Bright Light doing. So now guys, we're gonna change decks. This is Bright Light's tournament deck, the one that he prefers using in victory challenges and in tournaments. I figured we'd switch things up a little bit and highlight two of his decks. He really loves both of these, so this one's another classic. This time we're playing the Giant, and we're playing the Giant Poison deck. Surprise, surprise. This one has the mini pack, a pretty standard composition here. You can see Ice Spirit already, and we're going to talk about all the strategy keys that Bright Light suggests using a deck like this as well. Coincidentally, this deck has the Mega Minions, and you guys know if you saw my last video that I love Mega Minions. I think that Mega Minions are going to be a very underrated card until people get a firm grasp on how to play them correctly. They're very, very good defensively, and they're pretty good offensively, excuse me, if you can get them behind a tank. It's very difficult to take down a giant Mega Minion combo, and of course it only costs the attacker 8 elixir. That's a pretty good deal considering the DPS that Mega Minion can dole out from the air, which is another advantage obviously. So just be careful when you make sure it's protected well, but it can have great synergy with other cards in a deck like this. And again, you can see the fundamentals are absolutely on point here for Bright Light, following the golden rule here: pump early and pump often. You can see the opponent there decided to use the Poison on the King Tower, waking it up and activating it. Not sure I would do that with so much health on both of the supporting towers, but hey, that's what he did. So hey, whatever floats his boat, I guess. So Bright Light actually gave me a plethora of do's and do nots for this deck as well. In case you missed it, my video yesterday actually had a very, very similar deck, so if you want more information about one of these big beatdown decks where you build up that big elixir advantage and then you unload and really commit to these really strong pushes, go ahead and check out my video yesterday as well. But let's get to Bright Light's tip using this deck. So the number one thing he said in terms of something that he sees people do incorrectly often using any giant beatdown deck is you never want to play your giant and then play an elixir collector. So some of you might be already saying, why would anybody play the giant and then play an elixir collector? Well, it's kind of a human tendency sometimes where you play your giant, and then you might have, say, guards and a mini P.E.K.K.A. and elixir and poison in your hand at that point. And you have no slow-moving troops, so a lot of people might just be apt to play the elixir collector after the giant, and then play the speedier troops afterwards. But that's actually a big no-no according to Bright Light. What you want to do is, if you play that giant, you want to commit to the push by any means necessary. So you don't want to expend any elixir after you place that giant on adding an elixir pump to your current push. So that's really important. Let me go ahead and try to re-articulate that because it sounded kind of, I don't know, scrambled when I said it the first time. So golden rule number 1, don't play the elixir collector after you play the giant. Play the elixir collector before the giant, or don't play it at all. So let's cover a couple more do nots. So another big one he said is, when you see your opponent dropping a heavy tank coming in your direction, you don't want to play your mini P.E.K.K.A., which is obviously your biggest weapon against those big HP tanks. You don't want to play your mini P.E.K.K.A. until the tank crosses the bridge. Very, very important, because of course, if you let your mini P.E.K.K.A. engage the tank on the bridge or on the opponent's side of the arena, then you're leave yourself very, very open to the opponent playing guards and just shutting down that mini P.E.K.K.A. or goblins or whatever they have. So be very careful on your mini P.E.K.K.A. placement. The next thing he said is, obviously you don't want to misuse the poison spell. He sees a lot of people using these big beatdown decks misusing the poison. Treat the poison both offensively and defensively as if it's a baitable spell. We talked about this during the first deck of this episode, but it's important for this deck as well. So be very careful that you don't fall prey to your opponent baiting out your poison spell as well. Poison is definitely very powerful, and you want to make sure you use it as a tool in your arsenal where you can actually get value out of it. You can use it defensively to slow down the troops and buy you more time, but just be very careful that you don't use it, against a tower and an elixir pump all by itself, because that would be considered a bait. So make sure you use it at the proper times. And in contrast, if your opponent has poison and you're able to bait it out of them, and you know they don't have it up or they don't have the elixir to use it right now, make sure you make them pay. That's what this deck is all about. So if your opponent uses their poison, obviously the number one thing you should be putting behind your giant is the guards. The guards melt by poison. The guard's definitely one of the best epics in the entire game, and poison also is one of the best epics in the entire game. So make sure you use your guards immediately and your ice spirit right behind that giant, because those are your low HP troops that can really make a dramatic impact. So check this out. Right now, Bright Light is doing exactly what I just talked about. Now, it's not going to really work out for him this time, but that's the idea. He knows that his opponent doesn't have the poison up, so he's going to go ahead and put the guards right behind that giant there. So, of course, the Inferno Tower is still able to target that giant right before those guards, but that's the idea anyway behind that principle. So, other than that, guys, these beatdown decks, they all have the same basic philosophy. You pump up, you pump up, you pump up. As soon as you build that elixir advantage, then you go hard against your opponent. You commit to the push. Now, it's not just enough to pump early and often. You also have to protect your pump. So make sure you use the Mega Minion, use the Ice Spirit, use the Mini P.E.K.K.A., use the guards, use whatever it takes. I mean, you invested 5 elixir to put the pump down. Make sure you get that 5 elixir at least back from the pump. So remember, whatever troop you put down to protect your elixir collector, eventually your opponent is going to have to counter as well. So it's not like you're totally losing whatever troops you might put down to protect it. Now, I know some of you are probably going to comment about the emote usage here by Bright Light. He's definitely a snarky emote user at times. Now, I should say that some of them are in retaliation, and other than that, I did ask him. I said, hey man, you do use emotes in some sort of a cocky way at times. What's the philosophy behind that? And he said, hey man, first of all, really nice guy. I gotta tell you, he was incredibly professional, friendly, and nice to me. Didn't seem like a jerk in any way, shape, or form. Oh, look at this. People are requesting into our little clan here. Top player tips. They must have seen him on the leaderboard. But anyway, guys, yeah, he said that it's all for gamesmanship. He said he tries to get in his opponent's head by not being DMing, not spamming them with emotes, but just throwing an oops out there every so often. So I know there might be a few people out there who aren't a big fan of that, but hey, at least he was honest and kind of fessed up, and hey, it is what it is. So I at least asked him about it. And speaking of him being a nice guy though, he does have a Twitter account, and he said he'd be more than happy to engage with any of you guys to answer any specific questions you guys might have about either of the decks that he shared. Even if you need substitutions or any help like that, he said go ahead and hit him up on Twitter. He'll answer every tweet that comes his way. So his Twitter handle is @BrightlightCR with no spaces. Again, it's @BrightlightCR. I'll of course include it in the description below as well. Also wanted to mention the very first deck that we shared in today's video that got him to #1 in the overall leaderboard that he's been playing for a while now was originally created by his old clanmate Oregon Beaver, so we wanted to make sure I included a shout out to him, so consider it done. And that is going to do it for today's video, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and special thanks again to Brightlight for doing this and being so generous again with his time and his tips. So guys, subscribe, stay tuned for more top player information and tips and strategy guides, and until then guys, take care.